Or, Rashani, do you think your law degree will protect you? Detective Thompson pressed Natasha against the wall, his breath smelling of whiskey and hatred. I've seen proud people like you break. One call, and your career will turn to dust. Let me go, Natasha whispered, feeling fear tighten around her throat. I didn't do anything. Nothing? Thompson laughed, and the sound was like metal scraping against glass. You exist in my city. That's enough. At that moment, a silhouette burst into the alley, and the detective realized he had made a fatal mistake. The most interesting part is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. Meanwhile, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Natasha Harrison stood by the panoramic window of her office on the 37th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Chicago, watching the sun paint Lake Michigan in shades of gold and copper. In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself, a 37-year-old African-American woman with straight shoulders and a determined gaze, dressed in an impeccably tailored dark blue Armani suit. At first glance, the embodiment of the American dream success. A junior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, owner of a penthouse in Lincoln Park, wife of a war hero. But behind this gloss lay a truth known only to her. Every day was a battle to prove that she deserved to occupy this place. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. The secretary, a young blonde named Jessica, poked her head into the office. Natasha, your 4 o'clock client is here, Mr. James Rodriguez. Thank you, Jess. Give me 5 minutes, then show him in. Natasha returned to her mahogany desk, where neatly stacked files lay. The Rodriguez case was special, a young Latino accused of a robbery he didn't commit. The evidence against him was fabricated, witnesses bribed, and the police turned a blind eye to the obvious inconsistencies. This was exactly the kind of case Natasha would take on for free if she weren't trying to hide her true motives from the firm's partners. Her phone vibrated, a message from her husband. Shall we meet for dinner at that Italian restaurant? I have news. Daniel, her anchor in this crazy world. They met 4 years ago at a charity gala for veterans. He had just returned from his 3rd tour in Afghanistan, still carrying invisible scars from what he had seen and done in the name of his country. Tall, with broad shoulders and piercing brown eyes, he radiated a calmness that only years of training for the most extreme situations could provide. But when he smiled at her, which he did often, all his severity melted away like snow under the spring sun. Their romance developed rapidly, 2 broken souls finding healing in each other. She helped him cope with post-traumatic stress and night terrors. He gave her strength to continue fighting in a world where she constantly had to prove her right to exist. Their wedding a year and a half ago was modest but filled with such love that even the cynical journalists covering the event couldn't hold back their tears. But even in marriage, Natasha couldn't fully relax. Too much was at stake. Every action of hers was scrutinized by colleagues, clients, society. One mistake, one misstep, and everything she had built over the years could collapse in an instant. Jessica entered with Mr. Rodriguez, a slender 24-year-old with anxious eyes and calloused hands of a worker. His mother worked 3 jobs to pay for her son's attorney, and every time Natasha looked at him, she remembered her childhood in Detroit, where her mother also fought for every cent. Mr. Rodriguez, please have a seat. How are you? How's your mother? Thank you for asking, Mrs. Harrison. Mom, she hardly sleeps. She works the night shift at the hospital and cleans offices during the day. All to pay you, and his voice trembled. And I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe I should just admit guilt and serve my time. Natasha leaned forward, her eyes igniting with the passion that made her one of the best lawyers in the city. James, look at me. You didn't steal anything. The video footage from the surveillance camera they presented as evidence was edited. I will prove it. The witness who supposedly saw you near the store changed his testimony 3 times, and each time his story became more convenient for the prosecution. And most importantly, you have an alibi. You were at work, and I found additional witnesses who will confirm that. James raised his eyes, hope appearing in them for the first time in weeks. But Detective Thompson told my mom that if I don't admit guilt, he will find a way to bring even more serious charges against me. He said he knows what we really are. At the mention of Thompson's name, something cold ran down Natasha's spine. Detective Michael Thompson was a legend in the Chicago Police Department. 32 years of service, hundreds of solved cases, a media favorite. But those who worked in the justice system knew another side of his activities. Too many cases he was involved in ended with questionable confessions of guilt. Too many witnesses suddenly changed their testimonies after talking to him. And too many young people from minority neighborhoods received maximum sentences in his cases. James, Natasha said, her voice taking on a steely tone, Detective Thompson is trying to intimidate you because he knows he has no real evidence. We are going all the way. Your mother doesn't work 3 jobs for you to give up. She does it because she believes in your innocence. And I believe it too. After the client left, Natasha was alone with her thoughts. The Rodriguez case was not the first where Thompson's name had come up. Over the past 2 years, she had noticed a pattern. Certain police officers, certain cases, a certain type of defendant. Always young, always from minorities, always with minimal means to defend themselves. She opened a locked drawer of her desk and pulled out a thick folder she had kept secret from everyone. Project Justice. That's what she called it to herself. The folder contained copies of cases, statistics, photographs, testimonies. The picture that was forming was frightening. Systemic corruption, masked by the shine of medals and ribbons for bravery. But Natasha was not just an idealist. She was a strategist. She knew that suspicion alone was not enough. She needed irrefutable evidence, witnesses willing to speak, and, most importantly, a way to protect herself and her family from retaliation. Her thoughts were interrupted by the intercom ringing in the office building. "Mrs. Harrison," came the voice of the guard. "Detective Thompson from the Chicago Police is here. He says he wants to ask you a few questions about the Rodriguez case." Natasha's heart skipped a beat. Thompson never came to lawyers' offices. He summoned them to the precinct, creating a home advantage and psychological pressure. The fact that he came to her meant only one thing. She had gotten too close to something important. "Show him up," she said, surprised at how calm her voice sounded. Detective Michael Thompson entered her office like he owned the place. A tall man of 58 with graying temples and cold blue eyes, he exuded the power and confidence of a man used to having his word be law. His dark gray suit was expensive, his watch Swiss, and his smile predatory. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, not waiting for an invitation to sit. "What a lovely office. An impressive view of the lake. It must cost a fortune." "Detective Thompson," Natasha replied, remaining standing behind her desk, creating a barrier between them. "What brings you to my office? If this concerns the Rodriguez case, all questions should be directed through the prosecutor's office." Thompson laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Oh, I'm not here on official business. Rather, a friendly visit. You see, I've heard rumors that you've been asking a lot of questions about some of my affairs, checking timelines, looking for patterns." Natasha felt her muscles tense. He knew more than she thought. "I'm thoroughly preparing to defend my client." Of course, of course." Thompson slowly walked around the office, examining the diplomas on the walls, family photographs, awards. "But some people might misinterpret such thoroughness. They might think you're overstepping your bounds. Harvard Law School, impressive. Your parents must have been very proud. Although," he paused at a photograph of her wedding, "I heard your father has passed away. A heart attack at 51. A tragedy." The mention of her father was a low blow. Robert Johnson had died a year before Natasha graduated from law school. He had worked his whole life at an auto plant in Detroit, saving every penny for his daughter's education. He never saw his dreams come to fruition. "Leave my family out of this," Natasha said, her voice taking on a steely tone. "Family?" Thompson turned to her, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "What about your husband, Daniel Harrison, it seems, a former Special Forces operative, a war hero. But war heroes sometimes break. Post-traumatic stress, anger outbursts, alcohol problems. I've seen plenty of those cases." "What do you want, detective?" Thompson stepped closer, his presence filling the office space. "I want you to understand one simple thing, Mrs. Harrison. This city is a complex ecosystem. Everyone in it knows their place. Lawyers defend clients, police catch criminals, judges pass sentences. When someone starts crossing boundaries, the ecosystem breaks down. And what happens then? Then people like me come in to fix things." Natasha stood tall, meeting his gaze without fear. "Detective Thompson, if you have official questions for me, schedule an appointment through my secretary. If not, the door's right there." Thompson smiled, but the smile was as cold as ice. "I understand. You're used to being in charge in your little world. But outside this office, different rules apply. And I am an expert in those rules." He headed for the door, but stopped in the doorway. By the way, beautiful dress on your friend in the wedding photo. What's her name? Monica Clark? Your maid of honor and best friend from college, if I'm not mistaken. Works at a daycare in the South Side. A wonderful job. Raising children. I hope she's doing well. The threat was veiled but absolutely clear. Natasha felt the blood drain from her face. I'm not doing anything, Thompson said softly, just taking a friendly interest in the well-being of all the good people in our city. After he left, Natasha sank into a chair, her hands trembling. She pulled out her phone and dialed Daniel's number. Dan, it's me. We need to talk. Right now. Daniel Harrison stood in his garage, converted into a workshop, slowly disassembling a 1947 Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Working with his hands had always helped him think, and today he had a lot on his mind. His wife's call interrupted his thoughts, and the worry in her voice made him drop everything. It took him 40 minutes to get from their home in Lincoln Park to downtown. The office building where Natasha worked loomed over Chicago like a glass monolith, a symbol of power and success. Daniel had always felt out of place among the marble floors and gilded elevators, but for his wife, he was willing to endure this ostentatious glamour. Natasha met him in her office. One look was enough to understand. Something was seriously wrong. After 4 years of marriage, he had learned to read her like an open book. She was trying to appear calm, but her eyes betrayed her fear. What happened? He asked, embracing her. Detective Thompson came to see me. Daniel recognized that name. Natasha sometimes mentioned him in connection with work, and never in a positive context. And what did he want? To intimidate me. He knows about my investigation, Dan. Somehow he found out that I'm gathering information about him and his methods. Natasha talked about the detective's visit, his veiled threats, and how he mentioned Monica. With each word, Daniel's face grew darker. Did he threaten our friends? Not directly, but the meaning was clear. Daniel paced the office, his military training automatically assessing potential threats and escape routes. In Afghanistan, he commanded a Delta Force unit, carrying out missions that weren't reported in the newspapers. 3 tours of duty, 18 successful operations, not a single soldier lost under his command. But this was a different enemy, a different battlefield. Natasha, he said, stopping in front of her desk, I understand that this case is important to you. I understand why you want to fight against injustice. But if this man is truly dangerous, are you suggesting I give up? Bitterness tinged her voice. Let him continue to ruin the lives of innocent people? I'm suggesting you think about the consequences. We have a life we've built. We have plans for the future, children we want. What future can our children have in a world where people like Thompson feel untouchable? Daniel understood her logic. He himself went to war for that very reason, to protect the world in which his future children could grow up. But war had changed him. He had seen what happens when good people fight monsters. Sometimes they become monsters themselves. All right, he finally said. If we're doing this, we do it right. No solo actions, no risks. Every step we plan together. Natasha rushed to him, hugging him tightly as if he were the only solid ground in her crumbling world. Thank you, she whispered. I can't do this alone. And you won't have to. They agreed to meet at home in 2 hours to plan their next steps. Daniel drove first, but on the way he stopped at a small cafe near their house where he often bought coffee. Behind the counter was Kelly Romano, a young Italian woman whose family had owned the establishment for 3 generations. Hi, Dan. The usual order? Yes, thanks. And another cappuccino for Natasha. While Kelly prepared the coffee, Daniel noticed a familiar figure outside the window. A police car slowly passed by the cafe, then turned around and drove by again. The officer behind the wheel was someone Daniel didn't recognize, but something about his behavior was unsettling. Kelly, he said quietly, does that police officer come here often? The girl glanced out the window and frowned. Strange. I've seen him here for the 3rd time in the last 2 days. He just sits in the car and watches. Maybe he's looking for someone. Daniel paid for the coffee and stepped outside. The police car passed by again, and this time he was able to see the number. 7th Precinct. Detective Thompson's precinct. The house he and Natasha bought 2 years ago was their pride. A Victorian building from the 19th century, lovingly restored with attention to detail. 3 floors, a spacious kitchen where they planned to prepare Sunday dinners for a large family, and an attic that Daniel had turned into his office. Going upstairs, he opened a concealed safe where he kept items only Natasha knew about. Documents marked classified, photographs of his unit, awards he preferred not to discuss, and weapons. Not only his personal Glock 19, but also a sniper rifle that he was officially supposed to turn in upon leaving the army. Daniel took out binoculars and approached the attic window, which overlooked the entire block. The police car was parked at the opposite end of the street, partially hidden by trees. Amateur surveillance. In the army, they would have taught him to do this much more professionally. When Natasha returned home, he was already formulating a plan. "We're being followed," he said without preamble. "What?" "A police car from the 7th precinct. They've been sitting on our street for several hours." Natasha approached the window, but Daniel stopped her. "Don't stick your head out. Let them think we haven't noticed anything." "God, Dan, what have we gotten ourselves into?" "Into a war," he replied simply, "but we have advantages they don't know about." Daniel spread a map of the area and several diagrams on the table. "I've studied the surveillance routes around the house. They have 3 main positions, but all of them leave blind spots. Additionally, I set up security cameras around the perimeter last year. A military habit. We can track their movements." "Okay, but what does that give us?" "Information, knowledge of their tactics, and the ability to act when they don't expect it." Natasha sat next to him, studying the diagrams. "I have an idea on how to get evidence against Thompson, but it's risky." "Go on." "In the Rodriguez case, there's a witness who changed her testimony after talking to Thompson. Maria Sanchez, 18 years old, works at the store where the robbery supposedly took place. I think she was intimidated. If we can get her to talk." "Thompson won't allow that. He'll be watching her just like he's watching us." "Then we need to get to her first." Daniel nodded, already calculating the options. "Where does she live?" "Little Village, a Mexican neighborhood on the west side of the city." "Good. There I can blend into the crowd, but you will stand out too much." "Dan, I can't let you..." "Natasha," he took her hands in his, "you forget who I am. For 3 years, I infiltrated Taliban-controlled territories, gathered intelligence, and got out unnoticed. One corrupt cop is not Afghanistan." But even as he said these words, Daniel understood he was mistaken. Afghanistan had been a clear enemy. There, he knew the rules of the game, knew whom to trust and whom not to. Here, the enemy wore a police badge and hid behind the law. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass on the first floor. "Stay here," he ordered Natasha, pulling out his gun. Daniel silently descended the stairs. In the living room, there was a brick lying on the floor and shards of broken glass scattered around. A note was tied to the brick. "Stop or you will regret it." Simple words, but written with such hatred that Daniel felt the familiar cold in his stomach. The same feeling that gripped him before a fight in the mountains of Afghanistan. The war had begun. Maria Sanchez lived in a small apartment above the grocery store that had been owned by her family for 20 years. Daniel had been watching the building for 3 hours, studying the rhythms of the neighborhood, noting who came and went, who could be an undercover cop. Little Village was a neighborhood where people didn't trust strangers, especially those who stared too intently at the faces of passersby. At 6 in the evening, when the store closed, he saw Maria. A fragile girl with long black hair and frightened eyes, she looked much younger than her 18 years. Daniel waited for her to go up to her apartment, then circled around to the back of the building. The fire escape was old and rusty, but it held firm. Daniel climbed to the 2nd floor and knocked on the window. Maria flinched at the sight of his silhouette, but he raised his hands, showing he posed no threat. "Maria, my name is Daniel. I'm not a cop. I need to talk to you about James Rodriguez." "Go away," she whispered. "I don't know anything." "You do, and I know that Detective Thompson made you lie." Maria hesitated. Fear and something else, perhaps shame, battled in her eyes. "If I open the window, will you promise not to harm me?" "I promise." Daniel squeezed into the small room, furnished with cheap furniture but kept in perfect cleanliness. Family photos and religious images adorned the walls. It was a home of people who took pride in the little they had. "Maria, I'm the husband of the lawyer who is defending James. We know he's innocent, and we know that Detective Thompson intimidated you." The girl sank onto the couch, hugging her knees with her arms. "You don't understand," he said. "He said that if I didn't testify against that guy, he would find a way to deport my whole family. My little brother, my parents. They don't have any documents. Do you have any?" "I was born here, but that doesn't matter to people like him." Daniel sat across from her, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Maria, what really happened that day in the store?" The girl was silent for a long time, then spoke in a trembling voice. There was no robbery at all. A drunk white guy came into the store, started shouting, demanding money. The store owner kicked him out, but an hour later, the police came and said there had been a robbery. They showed me a picture of that Mexican guy, James, and said he had robbed the store. And you said you didn't see him? Of course, because he wasn't there. But then Detective Thompson came. Maria's voice broke. Daniel could see that the memories were painful for her. He was different, not like regular cops. He smiled, but there was something terrifying in his eyes. He said that I either confirm I saw James in the store, or my family would end up in a deportation center tomorrow morning. Do you have any evidence of that conversation? Evidence? Maria laughed bitterly. Do you think he recorded his threats? But she fell silent, thinking something over. But what? The store has a security camera. It records not only inside, but also outside. The day I had the conversation with the detective, I saw him talking to my boss by the car. Maybe the camera recorded it. This was a breakthrough, but Daniel understood that the recordings were likely destroyed by now. Where is the store owner now? Mr. Gonzalez? He's scared too. After the detective's visit, he started talking about selling the store, moving to another state. The sound of a siren outside made them both freeze. Daniel went to the window and looked out. 3 police cars had stopped at the entrance to the store. Damn, he muttered. They found us. What? How? It doesn't matter. Is there another way out? Only through the roof. But there... Her words were drowned out by the sound of boots on the stairs. The police were coming up. Maria listened carefully, Daniel said, pulling Natasha's business card from his pocket. If something happens to me, call this number. Tell my wife everything you told me, understand? The girl nodded, trembling with fear. Daniel opened the window and climbed out onto the fire escape just as they began to knock on the apartment door. Police, open up! He quickly climbed onto the roof but realized he was surrounded. Police officers with flashlights stood on the neighboring buildings, and several more cars waited in the alley below. Daniel Harrison, a familiar voice called out. Detective Thompson stood in the courtyard with a megaphone in hand. Come down. You're surrounded. Daniel assessed the situation. The heat. Jumping to the neighboring building was possible but risky. Climbing down the drain pipe could also work if he was fast enough. Harrison, Thompson shouted again. We know you're here. Don't complicate things. Daniel made a decision. He jumped onto the roof of the adjacent building, rolled to absorb the fall, and ran to the edge. The police began to move, but he was already descending the drain pipe of an old warehouse. Landing in the alley, he came face to face with Officer Wilson, a young cop he had seen paired with Thompson. Stop, Wilson shouted, drawing his weapon. Daniel didn't give him a chance to aim. He lunged forward, knocked the officer down in one motion, and disarmed him before he could react. Military training kicked in automatically. Sorry, he said, handcuffing Wilson with his own cuffs. Nothing personal. He made it to his car, parked 4 blocks away from the scene, and only then allowed himself to exhale. His phone was ringing off the hook with calls from Natasha. Dan, where are you? What's happening? It's fine. I'm heading home, but we have a problem. What problem? Thompson knew where to find me. He has a source of information about our plans. This is impossible. No one else knew. Natasha, Daniel interrupted her. Who else knows about your investigation? The silence on the line lasted too long. Natasha? Oh God, she whispered. I think I know who it is. The office of Natasha was filled with tense silence. Jessica, her secretary, was sitting at her desk checking emails when Natasha burst into the reception area. It was already late, most of the staff had gone home, and the building seemed almost empty. Jess, I need to check something in my office, Natasha said as calmly as possible. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Do you want me to help? No, thank you. You can go home. Jessica gathered her things and headed to the elevator, but Natasha noticed how the girl glanced at her before the doors closed. There was something wrong with that look. Natasha went into her office and carefully locked the door. Then she began her search. If there was a listening device in the office, it had been installed professionally. She checked the phone, the computer, even looked under the desk and into the ventilation grates, and she found it. A microscopic device was attached to the back of the frame of her wedding photo, the very one that Detective Thompson had been examining so closely during his visit. Whoever had installed it knew that this photo held special significance for her, and she would never move it. Natasha's heart sank. Someone she trusted had betrayed her. She recalled the past few weeks, trying to understand who could have had access to her office and knew about her plans. The list was short, the firm's partners, but they almost never came to see her without warning. The cleaning service, but they were accompanied by a guard. And Jessica. Jessica, who had been around for a year and a half. Jessica, who knew about every appointment, every case, every conversation. Jessica, who had always been so helpful, such a perfect secretary. Natasha took out her phone and called the building's security service. "This is Natasha Harrison from Coleman Reed & Partners. I need the surveillance footage from the last 2 weeks, all entries and exits from my office." "Mrs. Harrison, that's quite an unusual request. It's a security matter. I suspect someone has been entering my office without permission." Half an hour later, the head of security brought her a flash drive with the recordings. Natasha watched them with growing horror. Jessica had indeed entered her office when Natasha was not there. 3 times in the last 2 weeks, she had stayed late at the office, supposedly finishing work, but in reality rummaging through Natasha's personal papers. But the most terrifying discovery awaited her at the end of the recording. The screen clearly showed Jessica talking to a man in an expensive suit near the entrance to the building. The man handed her an envelope. She said something to him, pointing towards the offices. The quality of the recording did not allow her to see the man's face, but something about his silhouette seemed familiar to Natasha. The phone rang. "Daniel." "Natasha, where are you?" "In the office." "Dan, I found the bug, and I know who installed it." "Jessica?" "Yes, but that's not all. Someone is paying her. I saw the surveillance footage. Get out of there, right now." "Why?" "Because if she's working for Thompson, he already knows you found the bug. He will act." As if hearing his words, the elevator in the hallway dinged. Natasha peeked out of her office and saw Detective Thompson accompanied by 2 other police officers heading towards her. "Dan," she whispered into the phone. "He's here." "Is there another exit?" "The service staircase at the end of the hallway. Run, now." Natasha grabbed her bag and the folder with investigation materials, but it was already too late. Thompson stood in the doorway of her office, blocking the exit. "Mrs. Harrison," he said with a cold smile. "What a surprise to find you here so late." "Detective," she replied, trying to keep calm. "This is my office. Shouldn't I be the one surprised by your presence?" "Oh, we have a search warrant." Thompson waved the paper. "We received information that you are hiding evidence in a drug-related case." "That's absurd." "Perhaps, but a warrant is a warrant." The police began to search the office, turning everything upside down. Natasha understood that this was just a prelude. Thompson was planning something, and she was sure it wouldn't end well. "Detective Thompson!" One of the officers held a small bag with white powder in his hands. "Look what I found in her bag." Natasha went cold. She knew she had never seen that bag before. "Looks like cocaine," Thompson said, examining the find. "Mrs. Harrison, you are under arrest on suspicion of possession of narcotics." "You planted that," Natasha shouted. "It's a setup." "Quiet, quiet." Thompson approached her. "Such accusations could cost you dearly, much more than drug problems." As one of the officers put handcuffs on her, Natasha noticed Jessica's figure in the reception area. The girl stood in the shadows, watching the scene unfold with an expression far from sympathy. "Jessica!" Natasha shouted. "Why? I trusted you." Jessica stepped out of the shadows, and on her face was a cold smirk that Natasha had never seen before. "You trusted the wrong person, Mrs. Harrison. You thought you could change the system? The system is much stronger than you." "How much did he pay you?" "It's not about the money," Jessica replied. "It's about survival. People like Detective Thompson control this city, and people like you are just guests." Thompson placed a hand on Natasha's shoulder, and she flinched at his touch. "You see, Mrs. Harrison? Jessica understands how the world works. She knows her place, and you just can't seem to learn that." As they led her to the elevator, Natasha heard the sound of breaking glass somewhere below. Then the fire alarm went off. "What the hell?" one of the officers muttered. The lights in the building flickered and went out. The emergency lighting came on a few seconds later, but it was not enough to see properly. "Hold her tight," Thompson ordered. "This is no coincidence." And he was right. Daniel Harrison was climbing the service stairs, using the darkness as cover. He had a plan, and he was ready to put it into action. Daniel knew the layout of the building by heart. He had studied it right after Natasha got the job at the firm. Military paranoia, as she called it, but now that habit could save her life. By cutting off the electricity in the basement, He used the service stairs to ascend to the 37th floor. The sound of the fire alarm drowned out his footsteps, and the emergency lighting created enough shadows for him to move unnoticed. He had a weapon, his personal Glock, but he hoped he wouldn't have to shoot. This was a civilian building, full of innocent people, even if most of them had already gone home. Through the ventilation grate, he heard voices in the hallway near Natasha's office. "The elevators aren't working," one of the officers said. "We'll have to take the stairs." "Then let's move," Thompson replied. "And hold her tight. If she tries to run, shoot." Daniel gritted his teeth. Thompson was crossing all boundaries, but that also meant he was desperate. A cornered animal becomes the most dangerous. He waited until the group began to descend the stairs, then silently slipped out of the vent and followed them. The emergency lighting in the stairwell was even dimmer, which played to his advantage. On the 35th floor, he decided to act. One of the officers was bringing up the rear, glancing back from time to time. Daniel waited for the right moment and lunged at him from behind, covering his mouth with his hand and knocking him unconscious with a move he had been taught in special forces. The officer crumpled to the floor without a sound. Daniel took his weapon and radio, then continued the pursuit. Thompson and the second officer didn't notice their colleague was missing until the 32nd floor. "Where's Johnson?" Thompson asked, looking back. "I don't know, sir. He was here a minute ago." "Damn, Harrison is here." Thompson pulled out the radio. "All units, I need backup at the office building on LaSalle Street. The suspect is armed and extremely dangerous." "Detective," Natasha said, "if you let me go now, I won't sue you for unlawful arrest." Thompson laughed. "You still don't get it, do you? There won't be a trial. Tomorrow morning, the local news will tell the tragic story of how a successful lawyer and her veteran husband had a shootout with the police. Unfortunately, no one survived." "You can't do this." "I can, and I will. And do you know why? Because I am the law in this city. 32 years of service, connections in all the right places. Who will believe dead junkies over a living police hero?" They reached the 28th floor when the lights suddenly turned on. Daniel switched off the emergency generators again, but this time he left only the lighting in the stairwell on. "Smart bastard," Thompson muttered. "All right, Harrison," he shouted into the empty stairwell. "I know you're here. Want to talk? Let's talk." The echo of his voice bounced off the concrete walls. "I have your wife, and if you don't show up in the next 2 minutes, I'll start hurting her." Daniel froze. He knew it was a bluff. Thompson wouldn't torture Natasha here in a building full of potential witnesses. But he also knew that the detective was desperate enough to do anything. "1 minute, Harrison," Thompson shouted again. Daniel made a decision. He slowly descended a few steps, keeping his hands in sight. "I'm here, Thompson." The detective smiled upon seeing him. "Good. Now drop your weapon and come here. First, let my wife go." "I'm afraid that's impossible. You see, you both have too much information that could harm good people." "Good people?" Daniel slowly descended the steps. "You framed an innocent woman. You're intimidating witnesses. You're a corrupt cop, Thompson." "I'm a survivor," the detective replied. "There are 2 types of people in this city, those who understand the rules of the game and those who become victims. Guess which category you belong to." At that moment, Daniel heard a sound that made his heart skip a beat. Sirens outside the building. Reinforcements were arriving. "Do you hear that?" Thompson tilted his head, listening. "That's the sound of inevitability. In 5 minutes, there will be a dozen cops here, and they'll all be on my side." "Not all," said a voice from above. Detective Celeste Grant from Internal Affairs appeared on the landing, holding a weapon aimed at Thompson. "Celeste," Thompson said in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Doing my job, Mike, what I should have done years ago." "You don't understand the situation?" "I understand better than you think." Grant descended a few more steps. "I have recordings of your conversations with informants. I have bank documents showing unexplained deposits in your account. And I have the testimony of Officer Wilson, who decided to cooperate with the investigation." Thompson's face turned pale. "Wilson? That weakling wouldn't dare." "He already did. An hour ago, he gave full testimony about your methods, about how you plant evidence, intimidate witnesses, take bribes from drug dealers." Thompson slowly turned to Natasha, and something insane appeared in his eyes. "If I go down, I'm not going alone," he whispered. He suddenly yanked Natasha towards him, pressing the gun to her head. "Nobody moves!" "Either," he shouted, "or she dies." In the tense silence of the stairwell, only heavy breathing and the sound of sirens outside could be heard. "Mike," Grant said softly, You're only making your situation worse. Let her go." "No!" Thompson pressed the gun to Natasha's temple. "I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in prison because of them." Daniel saw the fear in his wife's eyes, but also determination. She was ready for what was about to happen next. "Natasha," he said quietly, "do you remember our first meeting?" She nodded almost imperceptibly. "You told me back then that the most important thing in life is to never give up." "Shut up," Thompson shouted. "Enough talking." But Natasha understood. She remembered. That evening at the charity dinner, Daniel had told her about the tactical techniques of special forces, about how important it was to trust your partner, even when everything seems hopeless. Natasha suddenly threw her head back, hitting Thompson on the nose. The detective cried out in pain and momentarily loosened his grip. That was enough. Daniel lunged forward, knocking Thompson off his feet. The gun flew from the detective's hands and clattered down the stairs. The two men tumbled down the staircase, each trying to gain the upper hand. Thompson was stronger than Daniel had expected and fought back desperately. He landed several painful blows to Daniel's ribs, but Daniel's military training prevailed. A precise strike to the solar plexus, then a grab and a submission hold, and Thompson lay on the floor, immobilized. It's over," Daniel said, breathing heavily. But the detective was not giving up yet. He reached for the backup gun in the holster on his ankle. "Dan!" Natasha shouted. A shot rang out in the confined space of the stairwell, stunning everyone present, but it was Detective Grant who fired. Thompson fell, pressing his hand to his shoulder, from which blood was seeping. "You made the right choice, Celeste," he rasped. "But this is not the end. I have friends. I have connections. They will get to you. And them too." Grant stepped closer, keeping her weapon raised. "Maybe, Mike, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night." The sound of heavy boots on the stairs signaled that reinforcements had finally arrived. But this time they were not Thompson's allies. They were honest cops from the Internal Affairs Department. The hospital room was quiet and sterile, bathed in cold fluorescent light. Natasha sat on the edge of the bed while the doctor examined her wrists, where the handcuffs had left red marks. The physical injuries were minor, but the emotional scars ran much deeper. Daniel stood by the window, watching the reporters gathering at the hospital entrance. The story had already made the news. Corrupt detective arrested after dramatic confrontation. But Daniel knew this was just the beginning. "Mrs. Harrison," the doctor said, finishing the examination, "physically you are fine, but I strongly recommend that you see a psychologist. What you experienced today—" "Thank you, doctor," Natasha interrupted him. "I'll think about it." After the doctor left, Detective Grant entered the room. She looked tired. The last few hours had been tough for everyone. "How are you?" she asked. "Surviving," Daniel replied. "And how is Thompson?" "The surgery was successful. The bullet passed through without hitting anything vital. He'll be ready for questioning in a few days." "And what's next?" Grant sat in a chair by the bed, rubbing her temples. "Next comes the real work. We have Wilson's testimony, recorded conversations, bank documents. But Thompson is right about one thing. He really does have connections. This investigation will touch many influential people." "Do you think they will try to bury the case?" "They will try," Grant nodded. "But we have one advantage. This whole story is already in the press. Too many people know for it to be simply covered up." Natasha finally lifted her head. "And what about Jessica? We arrested her an hour ago. She's staying silent for now, but her apartment is being searched. I think we'll find a lot of interesting things." "She worked for him for a year and a half," Natasha said quietly. "For a year and a half, I trusted her with my secrets, my affairs, my life." "Sonam." "Natasha," Daniel approached and took her hand. "It's not your fault, is it? I should have noticed. I should have felt it." "You're a good person," Grant said. "And good people sometimes can't believe in betrayal until it hits them in the face." There was a knock at the door. A young man in an expensive suit entered, whom Natasha recognized as one of the junior partners at her firm, Robert Kingsley. "Natasha," he said with a strained smile, "how are you feeling?" "Robert, what are you doing here?" "The firm is concerned about what happened. We want to make sure you're getting all the support you need." Something in his tone was unsettling. Daniel felt the tension and moved closer to the bed. "What kind of support?" "Well," Kingsley cleared his throat. "Given the circumstances, the arrest, drug charges, Connection to a corrupt cop. The partners believe you should take a leave of absence. An indefinite leave. Natasha felt her anger boiling inside her. Robert, I was arrested on fabricated charges. I'm a victim, not a criminal. Of course. We all understand that. But the firm's reputation, Grant interrupted him, should suffer because one of your best employees exposed corruption in the police? Kingsley looked at the detective with barely concealed irritation. I'm not talking to you, detective. This is an internal matter for the firm. Actually, Natasha said, slowly rising from the bed, this is no longer an internal matter for the firm. It has become a public issue, and if the partners think they can get rid of me to protect their precious reputation, they are sorely mistaken. Natasha, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable enough to understand that the firm is not afraid of public opinion. They are afraid that my investigation will go beyond just one corrupt cop. Kingsley turned pale. What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about. Natasha stepped closer. Thompson wasn't working alone. He had clients among the city's elite, people who paid him to keep certain cases from going to court, or to have witnesses change their testimonies, or to make inconvenient lawyers disappear from the horizon. Those are crazy accusations. They are the truth, and you know it because you've seen the invoices. You've seen where the money for the firm's charitable donations came from. Grant listened closely to this exchange, making mental notes. Mr. Kingsley, she said, perhaps you should stay and answer a few questions. I have a lawyer, he quickly said. Of course you do, Natasha smiled bitterly. Just like everyone else in this story. Kingsley quickly left the room, leaving behind a sense of unspoken tension and threat. Natasha, Grant said, if you have evidence linking your firm to Thompson, on him, I have suspicions and files that I've been gathering for months. But evidence, that needs to be sought. Then let's seek it. Daniel approached the window and glanced again at the crowd of journalists below. They're waiting for us, he said. Who exactly? Everyone. The press wants interviews. The prosecution wants testimonies. The city authorities want the scandal to die down. And the enemies want us dead. Dan? No, Natasha. We need to speak the truth. What we did today is just the first round. Thompson was one link in the chain. Now the whole chain will try to destroy us. Grant nodded. He's right. You have enemies whose existence you don't even suspect. People with money, connections, power. They won't stop just because one cop got caught. Then what do you propose? Natasha asked. Hide? Run? Stay silent? I propose being smart. Grant leaned forward. I have a proposition. Officially, my investigation is concluded with Thompson's arrest. But unofficially, I know this is just the tip of the iceberg. If you help me dig to the roots, I can ensure your protection. What kind of protection? Federal. This case could interest the FBI. Corruption involving city authorities always catches their attention. Daniel and Natasha exchanged glances. This was a chance to see the case through, but also a huge risk. How much time do we have to think? Daniel asked. Not much. Thompson has surely already signaled to his masters. They will start acting in the coming days. At that moment, a nurse burst into the room. Detective Grant, you have a call from the precinct. Urgent. Grant picked up the phone from the nurse, listened to the caller, and her face darkened. What happened? Natasha asked. Thompson? Grant said grimly. Someone broke into his room half an hour ago. He's dead. The silence in the room was deafening. How? Daniel whispered. It's unclear for now. The doctors are talking about a heart attack, but too many coincidences. Natasha felt the world around her beginning to crumble. The only person who could testify against the entire corrupt system was dead. So is it all over? She asked. No, Grant said firmly. Now it's personal. Outside the hospital room, dawn was beginning to break, painting the Chicago sky in bloody red hues. A new day promised new battles, but Natasha and Daniel Harrison were ready for war. The truth was worth more than their fears. Injustice was worth any price. 12 hours after Detective Thompson's death, Natasha's hospital room had turned into an improvised headquarters for the federal investigation. FBI agent Carolyn Mitchell, a woman in her mid-40s with steely eyes and unwavering determination, spread photographs, documents, and connection charts across the bedside table. Michael Thompson was a small fry, she said, pointing to the central photograph in the web of connections. The real players are here. Natasha leaned closer. studying the faces in the photographs. Chicago Mayor Richard Stone, State Supreme Court Judge Patricia Wells, several influential businessmen, and her heart stopped. "That's Robert Kingsley from my firm." "Not just him," Mitchell pointed to another photograph. "Your firm's senior partner, James Coleman." It turns out your law firm was not just a workplace, it was a money laundering machine for criminal proceeds. Daniel, standing by the window and watching the movement on the street, turned sharply. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that your wife was working in the heart of a corrupt empire without knowing it." Mitchell pulled out a thick folder. "For the last 3 years, the firm Coleman Reed & Partners has been defending clients who should have been in prison. Drug dealers, organized crime, corrupt politicians, and all thanks to Detective Thompson, who lost evidence, intimidated witnesses, and fabricated false testimonies." Natasha felt the world around her beginning to spin. All those years, all the cases she had won, thanks to her skill. How many of them were won because of corruption? "Not all," Mitchell said as if reading her thoughts. "Your abilities are genuine, Mrs. Harrison. That's why you were used. A clean reputation, an impeccable career, the perfect cover for dirty dealings." "James Rodriguez," Natasha whispered. "My client, the guy accused of robbery, the son of a competitor of one of the drug lords your firm is defending. His arrest was meant to serve as a warning to his father." Daniel approached the bed and took his wife's hand. He felt her trembling, not from fear, but from rage. "They used me," she said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "For years they used my reputation, my integrity, to cover up their crimes. And that's not all," Mitchell added. "Thompson's death was not natural. Preliminary autopsy results show the presence of succinylcholine in his blood, a muscle relaxant that, in large doses, causes respiratory failure. The person remains conscious but cannot breathe. The drug breaks down quickly in the body, making it hard to detect unless you know what to look for. He was killed to silence him." "Who could have accessed his room?" Daniel asked. "The list of suspects is long: doctors, nurses, visitors. But there's one detail that interests us. An hour before Thompson's death, he was visited by a lawyer." Mitchell showed them a frame from the surveillance camera. In the blurry image, a man in an expensive suit was visible, but his face was indistinguishable. "Sonny," the lawyer introduced himself as Michael Raymond from the firm Smith & Associates. "The problem is that such a firm does not exist, and there is no one registered under that name with the Illinois State Bar." Natasha studied the silhouette in the photograph. Something about it seemed familiar. Broad shoulders, a certain demeanor. "Agent Mitchell," she said slowly, "I need to see the full recording, and I need to talk to Maria Sanchez, the witness in the Rodriguez case." "I'm afraid that's impossible." "Why?" "Because Maria Sanchez disappeared last night. Neighbors say they saw the whole family packing their things in a hurry. No one knows where they went." Daniel clenched his fists. Another witness lost. Another thread severed. "We have a plan," Mitchell said, "but it's risky. We're listening. We want you to go back to work at the firm. Pretend nothing happened. Gather evidence from the inside." "That's impossible," Daniel protested. "After everything that happened, they won't believe she just forgot about it all." "She didn't forget. She got scared." Mitchell leaned forward. "Thompson's death scared them too. They'll understand if you decide that surviving is more important than fighting for justice. Many people make that choice." Natasha was silent for a long time, contemplating the proposal. It meant returning to people who had betrayed her trust, smiling at those who wanted to destroy her, working in a system that ruined innocent lives. "I'll do it," she finally said. "Natasha, no." Daniel turned to her. "It's too dangerous. Dan, if I don't do this, how many more James Rodriguez's will end up in prison? How many more families will be torn apart? And what if they kill you, like Thompson? Then at least I'll die fighting for what I believe in." Mitchell watched this exchange with professional interest. She had seen many couples fall apart under the pressure of federal investigations, marriages destroyed by secrets, betrayal, and fear. "There's one more problem," she said. "Mr. Harrison, you need to know that your past could also become an issue." Daniel froze. "What are you talking about?" "Operation Red Storm, Afghanistan, 2019. Do you remember?" Daniel's face went pale. Natasha felt something cold squeeze her heart. She knew there were secrets in her husband's military past, but he had never spoken of them. Dan? She whispered. What is she talking about? Daniel turned away to the window, his shoulders tense. Your husband was involved in the operation to eliminate one of the Taliban leaders, Mitchell continued. The operation was successful, but there were collateral casualties, civilians. Shut up, Daniel said quietly, not turning around. A family of 5, including 2 children. I said, shut up! Natasha had never heard such pain in her husband's voice. She got up from the bed and approached him, but he stepped back. Dan, look at me. Don't, Natasha. Look at me. He turned and she saw such anguish in his eyes that her heart ached. It was an intelligence error, he said hoarsely. We were told there were only militants in the house. We didn't know about the family. By the time we realized, it was too late. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew how you would react. You would look at me and see a child killer. Dan, every night I see their faces, Natasha. Every damn night. The boy was 7. The girl was 5. They were playing in the yard when we arrived. Tears streamed down Natasha's cheeks. She reached out to touch his face, but he pulled away again. Agent Mitchell, she said, not taking her eyes off her husband. What does this have to do with our case? Directly. The father of the murdered family, Ahmed Khalil, survived because he was in the city. For the last 3 years, he has been hunting down everyone involved in that operation. He has already killed 2. Your husband is next on the list. What? Ahmed Khalil entered the United States 2 months ago on forged documents. We are tracking him, but so far without results. Daniel slowly turned to the agent. Do you think he is connected to our case? I don't know, but there are too many coincidences in our case. Perhaps someone hired him to take you out while you investigate corruption. Or, Natasha added quietly, perhaps he just wants revenge on the husband who killed his family. A heavy silence fell. Everyone in the room understood that the situation had become even more complicated. This was no longer just a case of corruption. It had turned into a personal war with multiple fronts. I have a proposal, Mitchell said. We will provide you with protection, round-the-clock security, in exchange for your cooperation. What kind of cooperation? Mrs. Harrison returns to the firm and gathers evidence. Mr. Harrison helps us find Ahmed Khalil. To arrest him? To prevent more deaths. Daniel and Natasha exchanged glances. A chasm of secrets and pain lay between them, one that hadn't existed that morning. But the love that had bound them for 4 years was stronger than fear. We will do it, Natasha said, but I have a condition. What is it? James Rodriguez. I want guarantees that his case will be reviewed and all charges dropped. That can be arranged. And I want to find Maria Sanchez. Her family's in danger and I won't let them become another victim. Mitchell nodded. All right, but remember, from this moment on, you are working undercover. One mistake and you both could die. 3 days later, Natasha stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom of their home, preparing to return to the firm. The bruises on her face had nearly faded thanks to makeup, but the bruises on her soul were much deeper. Daniel watched her from the doorway. In those 3 days, they had hardly spoken. The revelation of what had happened in Afghanistan lay between them like a heavy burden. Natasha was trying to understand how the man she loved could have been involved in the murder of innocents. Daniel struggled with the guilt that had been eating him alive for years. Are you ready? He asked quietly. No, but that doesn't matter. She turned to him, and he saw the determination in her eyes. The same one that had made him fall in love with her 4 years ago. Hiya, Natasha, about what Agent Mitchell said. I need time, Dan, to think it all over. How much time? I don't know. They drove to the office building in silence. FBI agents in unmarked cars followed them at a distance, maintaining communication through a tiny transmitter hidden in Natasha's earring. At the office, she was greeted with feigned joy. Colleagues shook her hand, expressed sympathy for the terrible misunderstanding, and inquired about her health. But Natasha saw caution, suspicion, and fear in their eyes. James Coleman, the senior partner of the firm, personally met her in the reception area. A 60-year-old man with gray hair and an expensive suit, he radiated the power and confidence of a successful lawyer. Natasha, dear, how are you feeling? Better, Mr. Coleman. Thank you for your understanding. Of course. What happened to you is terrible. A corrupt cop, false charges. Fortunately, justice has prevailed. Yes, Natasha agreed, studying his face. Fortunately, we were all very worried about you, especially after the death of that detective. Thompson, I believe? What a terrible tragedy. A tragedy, Natasha repeated. That's exactly how I would describe it. Coleman led her into his office, a luxurious room with a view of Lake Michigan and walls adorned with diplomas and awards. Natasha, I want you to know, the firm fully supports you. We understand that you've been through hell. If you need time to recover... No, sir, I'm ready to work. In fact, work is exactly what I need right now. Wonderful. We actually have a new case that might interest you. He handed her a folder. On the cover was written, "The Case of Antonio Moreno, Drug Trafficking Charges." Natasha opened the folder and immediately realized it was a test. Antonio Moreno was one of the biggest cocaine traffickers in Chicago. If Coleman was giving her this case, it meant he was checking how far she was willing to go in her cooperation with the system. "This is a serious matter," she said. "Very serious. Mr. Moreno is a respected businessman who is being unjustly accused based on the testimony of unreliable witnesses. The police claim they have irrefutable evidence, but we know how easily evidence can be misinterpreted." "I understand. I knew you would understand. You've always had a clear head in such matters." Natasha had read the case materials and she felt sick with every page. The evidence against Moreno was solid. Phone call recordings, testimonies from numerous witnesses, seized drugs. But she also saw how the case could be undermined. Questioning the legality of the recordings, discrediting the witnesses, raising issues about the chain of custody of the evidence. "Mr. Coleman," she said cautiously, "some witnesses' testimonies seem very convincing." "Testimonies?" Coleman scoffed. "Natasha, you know how unreliable testimonies can be, especially when the witnesses themselves are under investigation and hoping for leniency in exchange for cooperation. And what if those testimonies are true?" A tense silence fell. Coleman studied Natasha's face closely. "Natasha," he finally said, "I understand that recent events may have shaken your faith in the system, but you must remember, our job is not to determine guilt or innocence. Our job is to provide the best possible defense for our clients. Even if those clients are guilty, especially if they are guilty, that's when they need a good lawyer the most." Natasha nodded, pretending to accept his logic, but inside she was boiling with indignation. This man, whom she respected and trusted, was openly talking about defending criminals. "There's another aspect to this case," Coleman continued. "The detective who is investigating Mr. Moreno is Officer Wilson, the same one who was the partner of the late Detective Thompson." Natasha's heart sank. Wilson was the cop who had agreed to cooperate with internal affairs and testify against Thompson. And what does that mean? It means that his reputation as a witness could be problematic. A person who betrays their partner can betray anyone. Or he's just trying to do the right thing. "Surinam, the right thing?" Coleman leaned forward. "Natasha, I thought your recent experience had taught you to be more pragmatic about concepts of right and wrong." "It has," she replied, infusing her voice with the necessary bitterness. "It taught me that in this world, only those who understand the rules of the game survive." "Exactly." Coleman leaned back in his chair with a satisfied look. "I knew you would understand." After meeting with Coleman, Natasha locked herself in her office and turned on the recording device that Agent Mitchell had given her. Every word of the conversation was captured, every hint of corruption recorded. But she knew that wasn't enough. She needed documents, bank records, evidence of money movement, and for that she needed access to the firm's computer system. The problem was that she only had access to her own cases. Financial documents and confidential files were stored in a secure system, accessible only to senior partners. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Agent Mitchell. "Need a hacker's help tonight." The reply came within minutes. "Understood. Husband can help?" Natasha looked at the photo of Daniel on her desk. In recent days, there had been a wall of silence and pain between them, but now she needed his help. "Maybe," she replied. Daniel sat in his workshop, disassembling and reassembling the same engine for the third time that day. Working with his hands usually helped him think, but today the thoughts were too painful to distract from. Afghanistan. Operation Red Storm. The Khalil family. For 3 years, he had hidden this secret from Natasha. 3 years of waking up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night, seeing the faces of those children. For 3 years, he battled with the guilt that gnawed at him from the inside like cancer. And now Natasha knew. He saw in her eyes what he feared the most. disappointment, disgust, fear of the man who had once been her hero. The sound of the opening door interrupted his thoughts. Natasha entered the workshop for the first time in 3 days. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi, I need your help." "With what?" "I need to access the company's computer system, hack into the secure files." Daniel set down his tools and turned to her. "That's illegal." "Yes, but it's the only way to get evidence against the people who are destroying innocent lives." Natasha, Dan, I know you feel guilty about what happened in Afghanistan. I know you think of yourself as a killer, but you have a chance to atone for your guilt, to help save people instead of killing them. Her words struck harder than a physical blow. "You think I'm a killer? I think you're a soldier who made a mistake, a terrible, tragic mistake, but that doesn't make you a monster." "Children, Natasha, I killed children." "No." She stepped closer, cupping his face in her hands. "War killed those children. False intelligence killed them. Those who sent your unit without verifying the information killed them. You were a tool, not a killer. That doesn't matter to their father." "Perhaps not, but it matters to me." Daniel looked into her eyes and saw not disgust but pain. Pain for him, for those children, for all who suffered in this senseless war. "Can you forgive me?" "Dan, I have nothing to forgive you for. You didn't ask for forgiveness for fighting in a war. You've suffered for 3 years, punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault." But nothing." She kissed him on the forehead. "I love you. Not the soldier, not the hero, not the ideal version of you. I love you, the real you, with your scars, mistakes, and pain." For the first time in 3 days, Daniel felt he could breathe fully. "All right," he said, "tell me about the computer system." In 2 hours, they devised a plan. Daniel indeed had hacking skills. In the Special Forces, he was trained in computer security and penetrating secure systems. But to hack into the corporate network, they would need physical access to one of the terminals in the office. "There's one problem," Natasha said. "What's that?" "The office is guarded 24/7. Surveillance cameras, motion detectors, security guards." "Not a problem," Daniel replied. "The problem is that after the hack, they'll realize someone accessed the files, and you'll become the prime suspect. Then I need an alibi." "What kind?" Natasha thought for a moment. "A family dinner, tonight, with your parents." Daniel flinched. His relationship with his parents was complicated. His father, a retired colonel, never understood why his son left the army. His mother blamed Natasha for turning her son away from his duty to the country. "Natasha, my parents." "I know, but we need witnesses to confirm that we were not at the office, but at home." "Fine, but be prepared for an unpleasant evening." Retired Colonel Robert Harrison and his wife Margaret arrived at 7 in the evening. Robert was a tall, gray-haired man with a military bearing and cold eyes. Margaret was an elegant woman with bleached hair and a disdainful smile. "Daniel," said his father, shaking his son's hand, "you look tired." "The last few days have been tough, Dad." "Yes, we heard about your wife's troubles." Robert pronounced the word wife as if it were a curse. "She run on a Natasha, dear," said Margaret in a falsely sweet voice. "How terrible what happened to you. But perhaps it serves as a lesson about what happens when people try to change the order of things." "Mom," Daniel warned. "What?" "I'm just saying that some people need to know their place." Natasha clenched her fists under the table, but remained calm. "Mrs. Harrison, perhaps you're right. Perhaps I really should have known my place." "See?" Margaret turned to her son. "Your wife is a smart woman. She understands." The dinner continued in a tense atmosphere. Robert criticized Daniel for leaving the army. Margaret made subtle jabs at Natasha, and she endured it all, knowing that every minute gave Daniel time to complete his mission. At 9:30, when the parents finally left, Daniel was already in the office building. Using skills acquired in the Special Forces, he entered the building through a service entrance, bypassed the security system, and made his way to Coleman's office. Hacking into the computer system took an hour and a half. Daniel copied thousands of files onto encrypted drives. Bank records, correspondence, financial reports, client lists. But the most shocking discovery awaited him in Coleman's personal folder. Among the documents was correspondence with a person signing as A. Khalil. From the exchanges, it became clear that Ahmed Khalil, the father of the murdered family from Afghanistan, was not just pursuing Daniel. Coleman's people found him through military connections. Someone in the Pentagon passed on information about the whereabouts of the participants in Operation Red Storm. Coleman offered Khalil money and assistance in obtaining a visa in exchange for security services, eliminating people who were hindering his business. Khalil agreed, thinking he was working against the American military responsible for his family's death. He did not know that Coleman was using his thirst for revenge to eliminate witnesses and competitors. Chapter 10. The Trap. Daniel rushed home at midnight, his heart pounding with terror and adrenaline. From the correspondence on Coleman's computer, he understood that Khalil had already obtained their home address and detailed information about their daily routine. He burst into the house, shouting his wife's name, but there was no answer. "Natasha! Natasha!" The house was empty. On the kitchen table lay a note written in uneven handwriting. "If you want to see your wife alive, come alone to the warehouse on South Chicago Avenue, 345. You have 1 hour. Come alone, or she will die." At the bottom was the signature. A. Khalil. Daniel grabbed the phone and dialed Agent Mitchell's number. "They took Natasha." "Who?" "Ahmed Khalil. But he works for Coleman. I found evidence on the computer." "Where are you now?" "At home. He left a note. Wants to meet at the warehouse." "Daniel, under no circumstances go there alone." "Where?" "I have 1 hour," he shouted. "You won't have time to organize anything in an hour." "Daniel, it's a trap." "I know, but I have no choice." He hung up the phone, grabbed his weapon and bulletproof vest from the stash in the basement, then got into his car. The warehouse was located in an industrial area on the south side of the city, a maze of abandoned buildings and rusty containers. Daniel parked 2 blocks from the specified address and walked, using shadows and cover. The warehouse building was enormous, a 5-story structure made of brick and steel, most of its windows boarded up. The only source of light came from the windows on the 3rd floor. Daniel circled the building, noting all entrances and exits. The main entrance was locked, but a side door was ajar, an obvious bait. He found a service staircase at the back of the building and climbed to the roof. From there, through a skylight, he could see the 3rd floor. What he saw made his blood run cold. Natasha was tied to a chair in the center of a large empty room. Her mouth was taped shut, but her eyes were wide open and filled with fury, not fear. Next to her stood a middle-aged man with dark hair and a beard, presumably Ahmed Khalil. But that was not all. In the shadows against the walls stood 3 more men with automatic weapons. And by the window, with his back to the room, stood a familiar silhouette in an expensive suit. James Coleman. Daniel realized this was not just an ambush. It was the finale of a long game. Coleman wanted to eliminate them both, using a man who had personal motives for revenge. He took out his phone and sent a message to Agent Mitchell with the exact address and a description of the situation. Then he muted the phone and began to descend into the building. The service corridor on the 3rd floor was dark and narrow. Daniel moved silently, using skills honed over years of military service. He could hear voices from the main room. "He should have been here half an hour ago," Coleman said irritably. "Tori, he will come," replied Khalil with a strong accent. "Such people do not abandon their women." "Ahmed, are you sure you can do this? Kill the man who killed your family." "I have dreamed about this for 3 years. Every night I saw his face and planned this moment." "Good. And then we stage a family drama. A war veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress kills his wife, and then himself. Very tragic, but not surprising." Daniel clenched his fists. Coleman was planning to kill them both and present it as a family tragedy. "Yeah, what about the evidence they might have gathered?" asked one of the armed men. "What evidence?" Coleman laughed. "Recorded conversations? They won't prove anything in court. Bank documents? Easily explained as legitimate fees. They have suspicions, but no irrefutable evidence. And the FBI agent? Mitchell. She is investigating Thompson's death. By the time she realizes what is happening, it will all be over." Daniel slowly cracked the door to the main room. He saw 3 armed guards, but were there more? He couldn't take the risk of not knowing for sure. At that moment, his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Roof, northeast corner. Sniper." Daniel realized that the FBI agents were already on site, but the message also meant that Coleman had more people than he had seen. He made a quick decision. Instead of waiting for backup, he decided to act now, while the enemies were unaware they were surrounded. Daniel suddenly flung the door open and burst into the room, shooting on the move. The first guard fell before he could even raise his weapon. The second tried to turn, but Daniel's bullet beat him to it. The third guard was more experienced. He dove for cover and returned fire. Bullets whizzed past Daniel's head as he rolled behind a steel column. "Khalil!" he shouted. "If you want to avenge your family, here I am. Leave your wife alone." Ahmed Khalil slowly turned to him. His face was a mask of such hatred that Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Daniel Harrison," Khalil said quietly, "the man who killed my children." "It was a mistake," Daniel replied, not coming out from behind cover. "I told you, we were given false information. We didn't know there was a family in the house." "A mistake?" Khalil laughed, but his laughter was filled with pain. "For you, it's a mistake. For me, it's my entire life. I know, and I am ready to answer for it, but my wife is innocent." "Your wife?" Khalil approached the chair where Natasha was tied up and pressed a gun to her head. "And my wife? Was she guilty for being born in Afghanistan?" Natasha tried to say something through the tape, her eyes darting between her husband and his tormentor. "Khalil," Coleman interjected, "we can't afford long conversations. Do what we're paying you for." "Paying?" Daniel turned to Coleman. "You're paying him to kill?" "I'm paying him for justice," Coleman replied coldly. "Ahmed lost his family because of American soldiers. Now he is helping me deal with other Americans who don't understand how the world works. You are exploiting his pain. I'm giving him a chance for revenge. Isn't that what every father who has lost children wants?" Khalil hesitated, looking at Natasha. In his eyes, hatred and something else, perhaps remnants of humanity, were battling. "She's a lawyer," he said unexpectedly, "defending the innocent." "She's a hindrance," Coleman snapped back, "just like her husband." "My children were also a hindrance?" Khalil slowly turned to Coleman. "A 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl?" "Ahmed, this is not the time for philosophical musings. It's time for the truth." And suddenly Daniel understood. Khalil was not just a hired killer. He was a broken father being used, just as Daniel had once been used. "Khalil," he said, stepping out from behind cover with his hands raised, "they lied to you, just like they lied to me that day in Afghanistan." "What do you mean?" "Coleman doesn't want justice. He wants power. He's using your pain to kill people who stand in the way of his business." "Daniel, shut up," Coleman hissed. "How many more innocent people will you kill for his money?" Daniel continued. "How many more families will you destroy?" Khalil paused, the gun still aimed at Natasha. "I only killed bad people. Corrupt cops, drug dealers. And my wife? Is she a bad person? She spends her life protecting people like James Rodriguez, young guys that the system is trying to break." "Enough!" Coleman shouted, pulling out his own weapon. "Ahmed, do your job, or I'll find someone else." At that moment, the warehouse windows exploded inward. FBI snipers opened fire, and a SWAT team burst through the main entrance. "FBI! Everyone on the ground!" The chaos lasted a few seconds. Coleman tried to flee, but one of the agents tackled him to the ground. Khalil stood frozen, still holding the gun to Natasha's head. "And Ahmed," Daniel said quietly, stepping closer. "My children are dead too. Not even born yet, but dead. Because every time Natasha talks about motherhood, I see the faces of your children and realize I'm not worthy of being a father." Khalil trembled, tears streaming down his cheeks. "They were everything I had." "I know, and if you kill my wife, I will feel the same as you do, and the cycle will never end." Khalil slowly lowered his weapon. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me for what I have become." The FBI agents surrounded him, but Daniel stopped them with a gesture. "Sir, wait." He approached Khalil and extended his hand. "Forgive me for what I did to your family." Khalil looked at the outstretched hand, then at Daniel's face. "We are both victims," he said quietly and shook his hand. 18 months later, Natasha stood on the steps of the federal courthouse, where the trial for the Chicago police corruption case had just concluded. James Coleman received 25 years in prison. Robert Kingsley and 3 other firm partners received 10 to 15 years. Mayor Stone resigned under public pressure a year ago. Ahmed Khalil testified against all members of the network in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was given 5 years, with the possibility of parole in 3. Daniel stood next to his wife, his hand resting on her shoulder. The last few months had been tough. Endless interrogations, threats, attempts at discrediting, but they had endured, together. "Mrs. Harrison," shouted a journalist, How do you feel now that justice has prevailed? Natasha turned to the camera. Justice never triumphs completely, she said. It requires constant struggle, constant vigilance, and a willingness to pay the price for the truth. And what price have you paid? Natasha looked at Daniel, then back at the journalist. We lost our illusions. We lost faith that the system always works. We lost the ability to live carefree. Was it worth it? Ask James Rodriguez, she replied. Ask Maria Sanchez, whom we found in Mexico, and who can now return home without fear. Ask the dozens of other victims who finally received justice. As the journalists dispersed, Natasha and Daniel were left alone on the courthouse steps. The city stretched out before them, the same Chicago, but now a little more honest. Are you ready for a new life? Daniel asked. What new life? Your own law practice, defending those who cannot defend themselves. Natasha smiled. And are you ready to help me build it? Until the end of my days. They walked down the steps toward the car, toward the home, toward the future they had earned through their struggle. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed, where justice was not just a word, but a reality worth fighting for. In Natasha's pocket lay a letter from Ahmed Khalil, received the day before. Dear Mrs. Harrison, I cannot bring back my children. I cannot change the past. But thanks to you and your husband, I have realized that I can change the future. When I get out of prison, I want to work with refugees, to help families who have lost everything, just as I have. I want healing to emerge from pain, not more pain. Thank you for showing me that even in the darkest night, one can find a way to the light. With respect and gratitude, Ahmed. Natasha clenched the letter in her hand. Some scars never fully heal, but they can become a source of strength for those who are willing to turn their pain into wisdom and their wisdom into justice. The story had ended, but the struggle continued, and that was beautiful. 6 months after the trial, Natasha sat in her new office. A modest space in an old building, but with large windows and a view of the lake. A photograph hung on the wall. She and Daniel at the FBI Awards ceremony for civic courage. There was a knock at the door. A young Latina woman entered, a law student who wanted to be her assistant. Mrs. Harrison? My name is Isabella Sanchez. Natasha looked up from her documents. Sanchez? Are you related to Maria Sanchez? She's my older sister. She told me what you did for our family. She said that thanks to you, we were able to return home. Maria is a very brave girl. She told me the same about you. Isabella sat down in the chair opposite the desk. I want to study law. I want to protect people, just as you protected us. Natasha smiled. The circle was closing. From pain and injustice, a new generation of truth fighters was being born. Then welcome to the team, she said. Outside, Lake Michigan sparkled, reflecting sunlight like thousands of tiny stars. Each star was a story. Each story, a chance to change the world for the better. Natasha picked up a new case. A young African-American man accused of a crime he did not commit. The story was repeating itself, but now she had the knowledge, experience, and determination to change the ending. Daniel entered the office with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that said he was prouder of her than words could express. Ready to save the world? He asked. One case at a time, she replied. And in that moment, in that modest office with a view of the lake, justice was not just an ideal. It was a reality they were building with their hands, their hearts, and their unyielding faith that truth always prevails, even if that victory costs everything you have.